The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as William paced nervously in his private study. His hands trembled slightly as he held the official letter that had arrived just hours earlier. Kate sat quietly in the velvet armchair. By the window, her usual composure cracking as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. The letter bore the seal of the royal physician, and its contents had shaken them both to their core. After months of mysterious symptoms and countless medical appointments conducted in absolute secrecy, they finally had answers. But these weren't the answers they had hoped for. William's mind raced back to the past 6 months. It had started with small things that Kate had tried to dismiss, persistent headaches that wouldn't respond to medication, moments of dizziness that left her gripping furniture for support. Most concerning of all were the brief episodes where she would forget. Simple things like the names of staff members she had known for years. At first, they had attributed it to stress. The royal duties had been particularly demanding lately, with multiple overseas tours and countless public engagements. Kate had always been the picture of grace under pressure, but everyone has their limits, or so they had convinced themselves. The turning point came during a private dinner with close friends at their country estate. Kate had been telling a story about George's latest school adventure when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her face went blank, and for nearly 30 seconds, she stared into space as if she was somewhere else entirely. When she snapped back to reality, she had no memory of what she had been saying. William had watched in horror as the woman he loved, the mother of his children, seemed to disappear before his eyes. That night, he had made the difficult decision to contact the royal physician. Despite Kate's protests that she was fine, Dr. Harrison had been the royal family's trusted medical advisor for over 2 decades. His discretion was absolute, and his expertise unquestionable. But even he had been puzzled by Kate's symptoms. The initial tests had revealed nothing obvious, leading to more specialized examinations that required the utmost secrecy. For weeks, Kate had undergone a battery of tests: brain scans, blood work, psychological evaluations, and consultations with specialists who were sworn to confidentiality. Each appointment was scheduled under false names, with Kate traveling in unmarked vehicles and entering medical facilities through private entrances. The stress of keeping this secret from their children had been almost unbearable. George, Charlotte, and Louis had noticed their mother's increasing fatigue and their father's worried glances. William and Kate had worked hard to maintain normalcy at home. But children are perceptive, and the little ones had begun asking questions that were difficult to answer. "Mummy, why do you look so tired all the time?" Charlotte had asked just the week before, her innocent eyes filled with concern. Kate had forced a smile and blamed it on a busy schedule, but the question had cut deep. The public appearances had become increasingly challenging. Kate had always prided herself on her ability to remember names, faces, and personal details about the people she met. It was one of her greatest strengths as a royal, making everyone feel seen and valued. But now, she found herself struggling to recall information she had known for years during a recent visit to a children's hospital. She had blanked on the name of the head nurse who had given them tours for the past 5 years. William had smoothly covered for her, but they both knew it wasn't sustainable. The press was already beginning to speculate about Kate's health, noting her apparent fatigue and occasional confusion during public events. The weight of their secret had grown heavier with each passing day. They couldn't confide in their closest friends or family members without risking a leak to the media. The isolation was crushing, leaving them to support each other through what felt like an impossible situation. William had thrown himself into research, staying up late into the night, reading medical journals, and consulting with experts around the world. He had used his connections to arrange consultations with the best neurologists, psychologists, and medical researchers, all under the strictest confidentiality agreements. Meanwhile, Kate had struggled with her own fears and doubts. She had always been strong, resilient, and reliable. The idea that her mind might be failing her was terrifying beyond words. She had begun keeping detailed notes about her daily activities, desperate to hold on to her memories and maintain some sense of control. The children had become her anchor, Every bedtime story she read, every school event she attended, every precious moment with them felt more significant now. She had started secretly recording voice messages for them, hoping to preserve her words and love in case her condition worsened. William had noticed these small changes in his wife's behavior. The way she held on to conversations a little longer, as if trying to memorize every detail. The photographs she had started taking of mundane family moments. The letters she had begun writing to each of their children, sealed and stored away. For reasons she hadn't yet explained to him, the uncertainty had been the hardest part. Not knowing what they were dealing with, or how to plan for the future, had left them both feeling helpless. Every symptom was scrutinized, every test result waited for with bated breath. Now, holding the letter with their answers, William felt a mixture of relief and terror. Finally, they had a diagnosis, but with it came a new set of challenges and decisions that would affect not just their family, but the entire royal institution. Kate stood slowly from her chair and walked to where William stood. Without a word, she took his hand, and together they read the letter once more. The medical terminology was complex, but the implications were clear. Their lives were about to change in ways they had never imagined. Outside their window, life continued as normal. Tourists gathered at the palace gates, staff members went about their duties, and the world remained unaware of the crisis unfolding behind the palace walls. In a few hours, they would need to make decisions about Kate's treatment, about their public duties, and about how to protect their children from the storm that was coming. But for now, they simply held each other, drawing strength from their love and preparing for whatever lay ahead. The letter in William's hand held their future, and tomorrow everything would begin to change. The next morning brought no relief from the weight of the diagnosis. William had barely slept, his mind churning through the implications of what Dr. Harrison had revealed. Kate's condition was rare but treatable, though the treatment would require months of intensive therapy and medication that could have unpredictable side effects. As they sat across from Dr. Harrison in his private clinic, the magnitude of their situation became clearer. The neurological condition affecting Kate's memory and cognitive function was progressive. But if caught early enough, as theirs had been, there was hope for significant improvement. The good news, Dr. Harrison explained in his gentle but direct manner, is that we've identified the problem before permanent damage has occurred. The challenging news is that the treatment protocol will be demanding, both physically and emotionally. Kate listened intently as he outlined the treatment plan. It would involve a combination of specialized medications, cognitive rehabilitation therapy, and lifestyle modifications. Most concerning was the requirement for complete rest and minimal stress for the first 3 months of treatment. What does that mean for our royal duties? William asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Dr. Harrison's expression grew serious. Your Royal Highness, I cannot emphasize enough how critical it is that the Duchess avoid all stressful situations. During the initial treatment phase, public appearances, official duties, even extended social interactions could interfere with her recovery. The silence that followed was deafening. Kate had never taken an extended break from her royal responsibilities since joining the family. The idea of stepping back from the charities she championed, the causes she cared deeply about, and the people who depended on her felt like abandoning her purpose. How do we explain this to the public? Kate asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. This was the question that had kept William awake all night. The royal family had always maintained a careful balance between transparency and privacy when it came to health matters. But Kate's condition would require an extended absence that couldn't be easily explained away. Dr. Harrison leaned forward in his chair. I recommend complete honesty, within reason. The public doesn't need to know the specific medical details, but they deserve to know that the Duchess is receiving treatment for a health condition and will be taking time to recover. William felt his protective instincts surge. He had watched his mother endure intense media scrutiny during her most vulnerable moments, and he was determined to shield Kate from similar treatment. But he also understood that their positions came with responsibilities that couldn't simply be ignored. Over the following days, they began the delicate process of reshaping their lives around Kate's treatment. The first step was telling their children a conversation they had both been dreading. They chose a quiet Sunday morning at their country home, away from the formality of palace life. George, at 11 years old, was beginning to understand the complexities of royal life. Charlotte, 9, was perceptive beyond her years. Louis, at 6, was still young enough to accept simple explanations without too many questions. "We need to talk to you about something important," William began, gathering all 3 children in the comfortable sitting room where they often spent family time. Kate had rehearsed this conversation countless times in her mind, found herself struggling to find the right words. How do you explain to your children that their mother's mind isn't working properly, without frightening them or making them feel responsible? "Mummy hasn't been feeling very well lately," she began, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "The doctors have found out why, and they know how to help me get better. But it means I need to rest for a while and take some special medicine." George, always the most serious of the 3, asked the question they had expected. "Are you going to be okay, Mummy?" Kate reached for his hand, drawing all 3 children closer. "Yes, darling. Doctors are very confident that I'm going to be fine. But it might take some time, and during that time, I won't be able to do some of the things I usually do." Charlotte, ever practical, wanted to know what this meant for their daily lives. Would she still be able to help with homework? Still come to school events? Would they still have their weekend adventures? William stepped in to reassure them. "Mommy will still be here with us every day. She just needs to take things slowly and rest more than usual. And yes, she still help with homework and come to your important events. We'll just need to be extra gentle and helpful." Louis, perhaps understanding less, but sensing the seriousness of the moment, simply climbed into Kate's lap and hugged her tightly. "I'll take care of you, Mummy," he declared with the fierce loyalty of a 6-year-old. The children's acceptance, an immediate rally of support, brought tears to both William and Kate's eyes. They had worried about how the news would affect their young ones, but once again, their children had shown remarkable resilience and maturity. The next challenge was informing the senior members of the royal family. King Charles, who had always been fond of Kate, was deeply concerned but supportive. He immediately offered to adjust the family's official schedule to accommodate Kate's treatment needs. Queen Camilla, drawing from her own experiences with health challenges, provided practical advice about managing media attention during medical treatment. "The key," she advised Kate during a private conversation, "is to control the narrative from the beginning. Don't let speculation fill the void." The conversation with William's brother Harry, conducted via a secure video call, was emotional for everyone involved. Despite the tensions that had strained their relationship in recent years, Harry's concern for Kate was genuine and immediate. He offered any support he could provide, even from his home in California. "She's family," Harry told William simply. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it." As they prepared for the public announcement of Kate's health situation, William found himself thinking about his mother's words about the importance of being authentic with the public. Anna had always believed that showing vulnerability could actually strengthen the connection between the royal family and the people they served. The palace's communications team worked carefully to craft a statement that would be honest without being overly detailed. They consulted with medical experts, media relations specialists, and even representatives from organizations that dealt with similar health conditions. The statement, when it was finally released, was simple and direct. The Duchess of Cambridge has been diagnosed with a treatable neurological condition and will be taking time away from public duties to focus on her recovery. The Duke and Duchess are grateful for the support and understanding of the public during this time, and they look forward to the Duchess returning to her royal duties when her health permits. The response from the public was overwhelmingly positive. Messages of support poured in from around the world, many from people who had faced similar health challenges or had loved ones who had. The transparency, rather than causing concern, seemed to deepen the public's affection for Kate and respect for the royal family's handling of the day situation. But even with the public's support, the reality of Kate's treatment was about to test their family in ways they hadn't anticipated. The medications brought side effects that were sometimes worse than the original symptoms. The cognitive therapy sessions were exhausting and emotionally draining, and the forced inactivity was, perhaps, the hardest challenge of all for someone who had built her identity around service and constant engagement. 3 weeks into Kate's treatment, the reality of their new normal had settled over the family like a heavy blanket. The medications Dr. Harrison had prescribed were working, but the side effects were proving more challenging than anyone had anticipated. Kate would spend mornings in what she privately called her fog hours, when the medication made her feel disconnected from the world around her. Simple tasks like organizing the children's schedules or following conversations required intense concentration. William had quietly rearranged his own duties to be home during these difficult periods. "I feel like I'm watching my life happen." To someone else, Kate confided to William one morning as they sat in their private garden. She had developed a routine of gentle walks in the fresh air. One of the few activities that seemed to help clear her mind. William had become an expert at reading her moods and energy levels. He knew when to encourage conversation and when to simply sit in comfortable silence. He'd also become fiercely protective of their family time, declining invitations and postponing meetings that weren't absolutely essential. The children had adapted to their mother's condition with the flexibility that comes naturally to the young. George had taken on additional responsibilities, helping Louis with his homework and making sure Charlotte remembered her sports equipment. Charlotte had become Kate's self-appointed assistant, organizing her mother's medications and reminding her about appointments. Louis, perhaps understanding the least but feeling the changes most acutely, had developed a habit of bringing Kate small gifts throughout the day. Drawings from school, interesting leaves from the garden, or simply his favorite stuffed animal when he sensed she needed comfort. Dr. Harrison visited twice weekly, adjusting medications and monitoring Kate's progress. The cognitive rehabilitation therapist, Dr. Sarah Chin, had become a regular presence in their lives. Her sessions with Kate were intensive, focusing on memory exercises, attention training, and strategies for managing the lingering symptoms. Recovery from this type of neurological condition isn't linear, Dr. Chen explained to William during one of their updates. There will be good days and challenging days. The key is to celebrate the progress while being patient with the setbacks. Setbacks were indeed frustrating. Just when Kate felt she was regaining her clarity and confidence, she would have a day where simple decisions felt overwhelming. She had struggled through a particularly difficult afternoon when she couldn't remember the name of their long-time housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, despite having worked with her for over a decade. "It's like trying to grab water," Kate described the feeling to William that evening. "I know the information is there. I can almost touch it, but then it slips away." These moments of frustration were balanced by small victories that felt monumental. The day Kate successfully helped Charlotte with a complicated math problem. The evening she followed an entire movie without losing track of the plot. The morning she woke up and immediately knew what day it was and what she had planned to do. William had started keeping a private journal, documenting Kate's progress and his own feelings about their journey. Writing had never been his strength, but he found that putting his thoughts on paper helped him process the emotional roller coaster they were experiencing. One entry read, "Today Kate laughed at Louis's silly joke about dinosaurs. It was the first time in weeks that her laughter sounded completely natural and unforced. I realized how much I had missed that sound." These small moments of normalcy feel like precious gifts. The public had remained largely supportive, though the absence of Kate from royal duties had not gone unnoticed. Tabloid speculation had been kept to a minimum by the palace's proactive communication strategy. But William knew that their patience would eventually have limits. Palace staff had been briefed on Kate's condition and the expected timeline for her return to duties. Everyone from security personnel to kitchen staff had been sworn to confidentiality, creating a protective bubble around the family during this vulnerable time. One afternoon, while Kate was resting and the children were at school, William received an unexpected visitor. His grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth's lady-in-waiting, Lady Susan Hussey, had requested a private meeting. Lady Susan, now in her 80s, had served the royal family for over 60 years and had witnessed every kind of crisis and challenge imaginable. She settled into the sitting room with the grace of someone who had offered counsel to monarchs and their families through decades of public and private trials. "Your Royal Highness," she began in her formal but warm manner, "I wanted to speak with you about something that may be of help during this difficult time." She went on to share stories from the royal family's past, times when health crises had been managed with discretion and dignity. She spoke of the importance of maintaining hope while being realistic about challenges, and of the strength that could be found in vulnerability. "The Queen Mother once told me," Lady Susan continued, "that the greatest service we can provide to our people is to show them how to face adversity with grace. The Duchess is doing exactly that, whether she realizes it or not," her words provided William with a perspective he hadn't considered. Perhaps Kate's struggle and recovery could serve a greater purpose, offering hope and inspiration to others facing similar challenges. This conversation sparked an idea that William discussed with Kate later that evening. What if, when she was ready, they considered sharing more of their journey with the public? Not the intimate medical details, but the human experience of facing uncertainty, supporting each other through crisis, and finding strength in family. Kate was initially hesitant. The idea of being more vulnerable in the public eye felt daunting, especially when she was still struggling with basic cognitive tasks. But as they talked, she began to see the potential value in their story. "If my experience could help even one person feel less alone in their own struggle," she reflected, "then perhaps there's meaning in all of this difficulty." They decided to wait until Kate was further along in her recovery before making any decisions about public sharing, but the seed of an idea had been planted, one that would eventually grow into something neither of them had expected. Meanwhile, the treatment was showing promising results. Kate's memory lapses were becoming less frequent, and her ability to concentrate for extended periods was slowly improving. Dr. Harrison was cautiously optimistic about her progress. Though he continued to emphasize the importance of patience and gradual reintegration into her normal activities, the family had also grown closer through this experience. Dinner conversations had become more intentional, with each family member sharing the best and most challenging parts of their day. William and Kate had renewed their appreciation for their partnership. Having navigated this crisis together with honesty and mutual support, as spring turned towards summer, there was a growing sense of hope in their household. Kate still had difficult days, and the medications continued to cause occasional side effects. But the trajectory was clearly positive. The woman who had feared she was losing herself was slowly but surely finding her way back to wholeness. But their journey was far from over, and the most unexpected chapter of their story was still to come. By the 4th month of Kate's treatment, significant improvements had become undeniable. Her morning fog had lifted 2 brief periods rather than entire mornings, and she could follow complex conversations without losing track of the subject. Most importantly, her sense of humor had returned, bringing joy back to their family dynamic. Dr. Harrison had begun discussing the possibility of Kate gradually resuming some of her royal duties, though he emphasized the importance of a carefully managed return. "We're looking at months, not weeks," he cautioned during their latest consultation. "And even then, it will need to be a very different approach to your public role." Kate had mixed feelings about returning to public life. Part of her longed to reconnect with the charities and causes that had defined her royal identity, but another part of her had discovered a deeper appreciation for the quiet moments with her family that her condition had forced her to prioritize. "I'm not sure I want to go back to the way things were," she admitted to William one evening as they walked through their private gardens. "This experience has shown me how much I was missing by always being on for everyone else." William understood completely. He had also found unexpected benefits in the slower pace their lives had taken. He was more present with the children, more attentive to Kate's needs, more aware of his own stress levels and limits. The conversation about balance and priorities was interrupted by an urgent call from the palace's communications director. A story was about to break in one of the major newspapers. Despite all their efforts to maintain privacy around Kate's treatment, the headline was scheduled to read, "Palace Insider Reveals Kate's Secret Struggle with Memory Loss." The article contained details that could only have come from someone with close access to their medical information or private conversations. William felt the familiar surge of protective anger that came whenever his family's privacy was violated. But Kate's reaction surprised him with its calmness. "Maybe this is actually an opportunity," she said thoughtfully after they had read through the leaked information. "We've been talking about sharing our story on our terms. Perhaps this forces us to do it sooner rather than later." They spent the next several hours with the palace communications team, crafting a response that would take control of the narrative. Rather than simply denying or confirming the leaked information, they decided to share their story fully. And honestly, the statement they released the following morning was unprecedented in its openness. Kate had written much of it herself, wanting her own voice to come through clearly over the past several months. "I have been receiving treatment for a neurological condition that affected my memory and cognitive function. This has been one of the most challenging experiences of my life, but also one that has taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, family, and what truly matters. I want to thank the medical professionals who have guided my recovery, my family who have supported me through every difficult day, and the public who have shown such understanding and kindness during my absence from royal duties. I also want to speak directly to anyone who may be facing similar challenges. You are not alone. There is help available, and there is hope for recovery. The mind can heal, just as the body can, though it requires patience, support, and professional care." The response to Kate's statement was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support came from world leaders, celebrities, medical professionals, and ordinary people who had been touched by her honesty. Several major newspapers ran editorials, praising the royal family's handling of the situation and Kate's courage in speaking openly about mental health challenges. More significantly, the statement prompted thousands of people to reach out to medical professionals about their own memory concerns or cognitive changes. Several neurological organizations reported significant increases in calls to their helplines and requests for information about available treatments. Dr. Harrison later told them that Kate's public disclosure had likely helped more people in a single day than most public health campaigns achieve in months. Sometimes, he reflected, the most powerful medicine is simply knowing you're not alone. The positive response gave Kate confidence to take the next step in her recovery journey. She began working with Dr. Chen to develop strategies for gradually returning to public engagements. They created detailed protocols for managing her energy levels, dealing with potential cognitive challenges during public appearances, and maintaining the treatment schedule that had been so crucial to her progress. Her first public appearance was carefully chosen, a visit to a neurological research facility that had been instrumental in developing her treatment protocol. She spent time with researchers, met with other patients undergoing similar treatments, and spoke with families who were navigating their own medical challenges. The engagement was scheduled for just 90 minutes, built-in breaks, and a support team that included Dr. Chen. Kate wore a discreet earpiece that could provide gentle reminders if she experienced any cognitive difficulties as she walked into the research facility. Kate felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had missed connecting with people, hearing their stories, and using her platform to highlight important causes. But she was also acutely aware of her limitations and the possibility that she might struggle in ways that would be visible to the accompanying media. The visit exceeded everyone's expectations. Kate was engaged, articulate, and genuinely connected. With everyone she met, she shared parts of her own story when appropriate, offering hope and encouragement to other patients. She asked thoughtful questions about the research being conducted and demonstrated a clear understanding of the complex medical information being presented. Perhaps most remarkably, she showed no signs of the cognitive challenges that had been so debilitating just months earlier. Dr. Chen, who observed the entire visit, later described it as a textbook example of successful neurological rehabilitation. The media coverage of the visit was extensive and entirely positive. Rather than focusing on Kate's condition as a weakness or limitation, reporters highlighted her courage, her advocacy for neurological research, and her role in reducing stigma around cognitive health challenges. William watched the coverage with a mixture of pride and relief. His wife had not only recovered from a frightening medical condition, but had transformed the experience into a platform for helping others. She had taken something that could have ended her public role and turned it into perhaps her most meaningful contribution to public service. But the most significant moment of the day came that evening when they were back home with their children. George, who had been watching some of the news coverage with them, made an observation that stopped both parents in their tracks.
Mommy,
He said thoughtfully, "I think you're even better at your job now than you were before you got sick." When Kate asked what he meant, George explained with the wisdom that sometimes comes from young minds. "Before, you were really good at talking to people and remembering things about them. But now, you understand what it feels like when things are really hard. That makes you better at helping people, doesn't it?" Kate looked at William, both of them recognizing the profound truth in their 11-year-old's words. The experience that had initially seemed like it might end Kate's effectiveness as a royal had actually deepened her capacity for empathy and authentic connection with the people she served. That night, as they reflected on the day and looked ahead to Kate's continued recovery and return to public life, they realized that their story was far from over. In fact, the most meaningful chapters might just be beginning. 6 months after Kate's first successful public engagement, their lives had settled into a new rhythm that neither of them could have imagined at the beginning of their journey. Kate had returned to approximately half of her previous royal duties, but the engagements she chose were more purposeful and deeply connected to her personal experience. The neurological research facility she had visited had become one of her primary patronages, and she had worked closely with them to establish a new program supporting families dealing with cognitive health challenges. The initiative had already helped hundreds of families access resources and support they desperately needed. William had also been changed by their experience. He had become a vocal advocate for mental health awareness, drawing from his own journey. As a caregiver and support system, his speeches now carried a depth and authenticity that resonated differently with audiences, particularly those who had faced similar challenges in their own families. The children had perhaps grown the most. Through the experience, George had developed a remarkable sensitivity to others who might be struggling, often asking teachers at school if there were classmates who needed extra support. Charlotte had become fascinated by medical science, declaring her intention to become a doctor who helps people with brain problems. Louis, though still young, had maintained his role as the family's emotional support system, seeming to instinctively know when someone needed his particular brand of cheerful comfort. Their family dynamic had shifted in subtle but significant ways. Dinner conversations were more intentional, with everyone sharing not just the events of their day but how those events had made them feel. They had learned to celebrate small victories and support each other through setbacks, with a patience and understanding that hadn't existed before Kate's diagnosis. Dr. Harrison had been monitoring Kate's progress closely, and her latest tests showed continued improvement. The neurological pathways that had been damaged were healing, though he cautioned that full recovery might take years rather than months. More importantly, Kate had developed excellent coping strategies that allowed her to manage any lingering symptoms effectively. "What's most remarkable," Dr. Harrison told them during a recent consultation, "is how you've both learned to work with the condition rather than fighting against it. That's often the key to long-term success with neurological recovery." Kate had indeed learned to listen to her body and mind in ways she never had before. She could recognize early signs of fatigue or cognitive strain and adjust her schedule accordingly. She had also developed techniques for managing stress and anxiety that had improved not just her neurological symptoms, but her overall well-being. The public's response, too. Kate's journey had been overwhelmingly positive, but it had also brought unexpected challenges. Media attention around neurological health had increased dramatically, and Kate found herself fielding requests for interviews, book deals, and documentary participation from around the world. "I want to help," she told William as they reviewed the latest stack of requests, "but I also don't want our family's private journey to become a public spectacle." They had learned to be selective about the opportunities they accepted, focusing on those that could genuinely help others while maintaining appropriate boundaries around their personal lives. Kate had agreed to participate in a major medical conference, sharing her perspective as a patient rather than just a royal patron. The response from medical professionals had been unprecedented, with many commenting on how patient perspectives were often missing from their research and treatment approaches. One particularly meaningful opportunity had come from an unexpected source. A documentary filmmaker whose own mother had struggled with similar cognitive challenges had approached them about creating an educational film that could help other Families navigate the medical system and access appropriate care after careful consideration and consultation with their communications and medical teams. William and Kate had agreed to participate in a limited way. The documentary would focus on the broader issues around neurological health rather than their personal story. But their participation would lend credibility and attention to an important cause. The filming process had been carefully managed to protect their privacy while still providing valuable content. Kate had spoken with other patients and families, sharing strategies and offering encouragement. William had discussed the perspective of family members and caregivers, acknowledging the challenges while emphasizing the importance of hope and persistence. During one of the filming sessions, Kate had an unexpected moment of emotional vulnerability. While speaking with a young mother who was newly diagnosed with a similar condition, she began to cry, remembering her own fears and uncertainties from the early days of her diagnosis. "I was so scared that I was losing myself," she admitted to the other woman. "That my children would grow up with a mother who couldn't remember their important moments or be present for them in the way they needed." The other mother nodded, tears in her own eyes. "That's exactly how I feel right now." "How did you get through it?" Kate's response was simple but profound. "One day at a time, with people who love you. And with the knowledge that healing is possible, even when it feels impossible." That moment, captured on film, would later become one of the most powerful segments of the documentary. It showed Kate not as a perfect royal figure, but as a real person who had faced genuine fear and uncertainty and found her way through to hope and healing. The documentary, when it was released, received critical acclaim and helped raise millions of pounds for neurological research. More importantly, it provided practical resources and emotional support to thousands of families dealing with similar challenges. But perhaps the most significant development in their journey came from an entirely unexpected source. Louis, their youngest, had been working on a school project about heroes when he announced at dinner one evening that he wanted to write about his mother. "Why, Mummy?" Kate asked, curious about his perspective. "Because," Louis explained with the straightforward logic of a 7-year-old, "heroes are people who get scared but do brave things anyway. And you got scared when your brain was sick, but you got better, and now you help other people not be so scared." His words hit both William and Kate with unexpected force. Through all the medical appointments, public statements, and careful management of their situation, they had perhaps lost sight of the simple truth that their son had articulated so clearly. They had faced something frightening together. They had found ways to heal and grow stronger, and they were now using that experience to help others. Was, in its essence, a story of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength in the face of adversity. That night, after the children were in bed, William and Kate sat in their garden, reflecting on how far they had come. The woman who had once feared she was losing her mind was now using her experience to bring hope and healing to others. The man who had once felt helpless watching his wife struggle was now a powerful advocate for families facing similar challenges. Their journey was far from over, but they had learned that healing comes not just from medical treatment, but from connection, purpose, and the courage to transform personal struggle into service to others. The door that had initially seemed to close on their old life had actually opened onto something richer and more meaningful than either of them had ever imagined possible. As autumn approached, bringing with it the 1-year anniversary of Kate's initial diagnosis, they began planning a special event that would mark not just her recovery, but the impact their journey had made on countless others. The idea had grown from a simple family celebration into something much larger, a testament to the power of vulnerability, healing, and hope. The evening air was crisp as they walked through their gardens, hand in hand, talking about the year that had changed everything. Kate paused by the rose bushes where she had once sat in confusion and fear, trying to remember simple words and fighting back tears of frustration. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had tried to hide everything?" she asked William. Thoughtfully, William considered the question seriously. "I think we would have missed the most important part of the whole experience," he replied. "The connections we've made, the people we've been able to help, the way our own family has grown stronger. All of that came from being honest about our struggle." Kate nodded, understanding that their decision to share their vulnerability had not only helped others but had ultimately been the key to their own healing. The woman who had once defined herself by her perfection and composure had discovered that her greatest strength lay in her willingness to be authentically human. As they walked back toward the house, they could see the warm lights in the windows where their children were finishing homework and preparing for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight they were simply grateful for the journey that had brought them to this place of deeper understanding, stronger love, and renewed purpose. The door they thought had been closing had actually been opening all along, leading them toward a future none of them could have imagined, but all of them had helped to create. The anniversary event had grown beyond anything William and Kate had initially planned. What began as a simple celebration of Kate's recovery had evolved into a major symposium on neurological health, bringing together patients, families, researchers, and medical professionals from around the world. The venue was the same research facility where Kate had made her first public appearance after her diagnosis. Now, a year later, she stood before an audience of over 1,000 people, preparing to deliver the keynote address that would cap off 3 days of presentations, workshops, and personal testimonials. Behind the scenes, in a quiet room reserved for speakers, Kate took a moment to center herself. The pre-speech nerves she felt were different from the anxiety she had experienced during her illness. These were the normal butterflies that came with addressing such a significant audience about something so deeply personal. William stood beside her, adjusting his own notes for the introduction he would give. He had insisted on being the one to present Kate to the audience, wanting to share his perspective as both a husband and an advocate for the families, support loved ones through medical challenges. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, though he could see in her eyes that she was more than ready. The confidence and clarity that had gradually returned over the past year were evident in her posture and expression. Kate smiled, the same radiant smile that had charmed the public for over a decade. But now it carried additional depth born from genuine struggle and hard-won wisdom. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," she replied. As they walked toward the main auditorium, they passed a display, wall covered with messages from people around the world who had been helped by the resources and awareness generated by Kate's openness about her condition. Photos of families, children's drawings, and heartfelt letters created a mosaic of gratitude and hope. One message, written in a child's careful handwriting, caught Kate's attention. "Dear Princess Kate, my grandma has the same brain sickness you had. When she gets confused, we tell her about how you got better, and it makes her feel less scared. Thank you for being brave." Reading those words, Kate felt the full weight and privilege of her platform. Her decision to share their private struggle had rippled outward in ways she was still discovering, touching lives in corners of the world she might never visit but could still reach through honesty and hope. The auditorium was filled to capacity, with additional screens set up in overflow rooms to accommodate everyone who wanted to attend. The audience included leading neurologists, research scientists, policymakers, and hundreds of patients and family members who had traveled from across the globe to be present for this moment. William's introduction was brief but moving, speaking about the transformation he had witnessed not just in his wife, but in their entire family's understanding of strength, vulnerability, and service. "The woman you're about to hear from," he concluded, "has shown me that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to face that fear in service of something greater than ourselves." As Kate approached the podium, the applause was sustained and heartfelt. She looked out at the sea of faces, many of them familiar from her visits to medical facilities and support groups over the past year. In the front rows, she could see her children, who had insisted on being present for this important moment. George gave her a subtle thumbs up. Charlotte beamed with pride, and Louis waved enthusiastically, despite repeated reminders about appropriate audience behavior. Their presence grounded her, reminding her of the personal journey that had brought her to this public moment. Kate began her speech not with prepared remarks, but with a moment of genuine reflection. "A year and a half ago, I stood in my kitchen holding a medical report that I was afraid to read. I thought that piece of paper contained the end of the life I had known and loved. I was wrong. That piece of paper contained the beginning of a journey that has taught me more about resilience, love, and human connection than I learned in all the years before it. She spoke about the fear and uncertainty of her early diagnosis, the challenge of maintaining hope when her own mind felt like a stranger to her, and the gradual process of healing that had involved not just medical treatment, but a complete reimagining of what it meant to be strong. I learned that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, she continued. It's a sign of wisdom. I learned that sharing our struggles doesn't diminish us. It connects us to others who need to know they're not alone. And I learned that sometimes the things that seem like endings are actually beginnings in disguise. The audience listened in complete silence, many wiping away tears as Kate shared specific moments from her journey. She talked about the morning she couldn't remember her children's names, the day she successfully helped with homework for the first time in months. It's the ongoing process of learning to be patient with herself as her healing continued. But the most powerful part of her speech came when she addressed the audience directly, speaking not as a royal figure but as one human being to another. If you're here because you or someone you love is facing a neurological challenge, I want you to know that your story isn't over. The chapter you're in right now may be difficult, but it's not the final chapter. There is hope. There is help. And there is a community of people who understand what you're going through. She announced the establishment of a new foundation, funded by donations that had poured in from around the world, that would provide direct support to families dealing with neurological conditions. The foundation would offer everything from financial assistance for treatment to practical resources for daily life, management to emotional support networks connecting families facing similar challenges. This foundation exists because of your stories, your courage, and your willingness to share your journeys with others, Kate explained. It's proof that when we're honest about our struggles, we create space for healing not just for ourselves, but for everyone who needs to know they're not facing their challenges alone. As she concluded her remarks, Kate looked directly at William and their children. To my family, who walked this difficult path with me, who never let me doubt that healing was possible, and who showed me that love really can conquer fear, thank you for being my constant reminder that we're stronger together than we ever could be apart. The standing ovation that followed lasted for several minutes, but Kate barely heard it. She was focused on the faces in the audience, many of them streaked with tears, all of them reflecting back the hope and determination that had carried her through her darkest moments. After the formal program ended, Kate spent hours meeting with audience members, listening to their stories, offering encouragement, and connecting families with resources. William watched as she moved through the crowd with the energy and engagement that had always defined her public work, but now enhanced by the deep empathy that came from personal experience. Late that evening, as they finally returned home, the family gathered in their sitting room to reflect on the day. The children peppered their parents with questions about the speeches they had heard and the people they had met. "Mummy," Charlotte asked thoughtfully, "do you think you would choose to have gotten sick if you knew it would help so many people?" Kate considered the question carefully. "I wouldn't choose the fear and confusion in difficult parts," she replied, "but I would choose the person I've become because of going through it. And I would definitely choose the opportunity to help other families feel less alone in their struggles." Louis, ever the philosopher of the family despite his young age, had the final word. So your brain getting sick was actually your brain getting ready to help lots of people. Kate laughed, marveling once again at her youngest son's ability to distill complex situations into simple truths. "Yes, darling, I think that's exactly what happened." As the family said their goodnights and headed upstairs, William paused at the window overlooking their garden. The roses that Kate had sat among during her most difficult days were now in full bloom, more beautiful than they had ever been. Like his wife, like their family, like their understanding of what it meant to serve others. They had grown stronger after surviving a season that had seemed like it might destroy them. The door that had once seemed to herald the end of everything they had known had indeed opened onto something entirely new. Not just recovery, but transformation. It's not just healing, but purpose. It's not just survival, but the discovery that their greatest struggles could become their most meaningful contributions to the world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, But tonight William felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this place of deeper love, stronger family bonds, and renewed commitment to using their platform in service of others who needed hope. The tears he and Kate had held back so many months ago had been tears of fear and uncertainty. The tears they shed now were tears of joy, gratitude, and wonder at the unexpected gifts that had come from their most difficult season. They had learned that sometimes the door you're most afraid to open is the one that leads to exactly where you need to be.